Our hope and prayer for this podcast is that our content will meet you right where you are and leave a spark that only God can fan based on His Word. We will give credit where credit is due when we remember. Most of our content is based on our life experiences and training, not to be substituted for the Word of God in your life.
Welcome to the Connected Heart Podcast. We are two Christian women
Here to laugh, have some fun, and engage in authentic conversations that lean into the power of connecting with God.
because thinking about God and thinking with God are not the same things. Well, welcome back to the Connected Heart Podcast. Sandy and I are thrilled you are back to join us. We have had a lot of fun doing this, and we've learned some things, haven't we, Sandy?
Oh, lots of things.
Yes. So we had our first guest, which was amazing.
Yes.
And we had our first 2-part episode.
I know. What?
I know. Well, the fun thing was we had quite a lot of comments because we had never had 2 episodes. And so we left some people hanging.
I know. But anticipation, it's a good thing.
Yes. As a matter of fact, we have been referenced that we were geniuses, that we
What?
left people hanging. So we're going to take that and we are just going to run with it
Yes.
and make that part of our identity.
Okay.
How's that?
We'll weave that right in.
I think we should just weave it right in.
Yes.
So it's great to be back. And we had so much great feedback and comments over having Jordan that we will certainly have other guests and love to have her back. But you and I are ready to move on to some subjects that are near and dear to us that we're seeing God just shine some light on.
Absolutely. And some of them are just an outpouring from what we've been talking about all along. And certainly the conversation with Jordan just brought up such rich conversation between the two of us.
Right.
That it was conversation we really feel like we need to share with our audience.
Absolutely. So that takes us right in to today's episode. But first, we want to bring back some highlights from our previous podcasts.
Oh, yeah?
Because I had a big morning walk.
Oh, okay.
And so I was walking, having a beautiful morning. I came around the corner and somebody had a skeleton hanging by its knees from a tree limb. And I thought to myself, I felt like that. I have felt like I was out on a limb and that there were some dry bones.
I think I would have been hanging by my fingertips, but knees, whatever.
I know. I thought the knees was pretty creative. I thought that was pretty good. So I was like, perfect limb to hang from your knees. So that got me really thinking about dry bones and some things that we're going to talk about today. But I think we need to bring back one of our special items for our podcast.
Oh, yes. Our curious questions.
Yes. So Sandy, what is your curious question
Well,
today?
I hope you're ready for this one.
Okay. I'm hoping.
Okay. Because I'm not sure there's an answer to this, but if anything is possible, is it possible for anything to be impossible?
Okay. I think we're going to edit that one out. Are you kidding me?
No, we can't edit that out. I mean,
know,
it's a
but
question.
seriously, that was not the one we talked about yesterday.
Oh, I've got plenty more. Don't you worry.
Oh, I am just wondering.
I mean, yeah, but I
Okay,
mean, we
okay.
kind of treat God that way, right?
Okay, you have to repeat it for me.
Okay,
because
okay,
I
here
am
we go.
like, are you kidding me? All right, go ahead.
I even had to write it down for myself.
Okay.
How's that grab you?
All right.
All right, here it is. If anything is possible, is it possible for anything to be impossible? You look stunned.
Well, I guess you are just finding great joy in watching me just completely be clueless.
Yeah, I'm
No,
kind of
okay.
clueless too, though.
Okay, well, thank you for being on my team.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the purpose of a curious question.
That's true.
You got to wrestle it to the ground a while.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Okay.
can't just have one that's easy to answer.
Well, I can't wait to hear what our listeners put in the comments.
Yes.
Because we have gotten some feedback on these curious questions.
Yes, have we?
Yes.
That's awesome.
I don't want to bring them up to you.
Okay.
Not while we're recording. But
Okay.
We can keep that. That's pretty good.
That's pretty
right.
good. I know it really is a question though, because I mean, you think about it in the context of your spiritual life too, right?
Yeah.
We say, well, nothing's too difficult for God. And then I'll believe that for your life.
Right.
But then when it comes to the hard stuff in mine,
oh, I know.
This one might be too hard, God.
Right. Not so much.
Yeah.
Well, one of the points that we made when Jordan was here that got you and I pretty excited and decided that we were going to do a whole episode on it was that God was really speaking to both of us about the potter's wheel and the clay and how God molds us and our response and so forth. So in the episode, the first episode with Jordan, I didn't even look at it on YouTube. So you said my eyes about bugged out of my head, but I didn't go back and look. But I just knew. I knew that it was a God moment that we really needed to revisit.
Yeah.
About shocking the clay. And we talked about that and having to go back in the water. And then God kept showing you and I individually more clay, more potter's wheel. So how did you take what Jordan talked about?
Well, I mean, I think I've been just continually mulling it over ever since that moment. Us knowing so clearly that God had intervened in that podcast and was just really downloading something that's really important for us to think about. Yeah. And then you sent me a recording of another message that someone had done around it. And it's just, sometimes things just kind of undo me and I have to really spend time with them. But I went home and I talked to my husband about it, and his story, and sorry, babe, hope you don't mind me sharing your story, but he was 9 when he accepted Jesus, and he was in a family that went to church all the time. And so we're talking back in the middle 60s is when he accepted Jesus. And I told him about what had happened during the recording, and he said, when I was saved, I don't think I felt like I was on a potter's wheel. He said, I think I felt like I was put into a mold. And I was like, oh my golly.
Yeah.
Wow. And it really hit me hard because I thought about the years of rearing my children and how, while I knew that I was to train them each up in the way they should individually grow and go, I still kind of tried to mold them into my ideal of what a Christian should look like. Intentionally, I guess.
Yeah.
Not out of a bad place in my heart, but out of a good place in my heart.
Right.
Feeling like, hey, I want you to really understand what it's like when you said Jesus is your Lord, and how do you help him be the Lord of your life? So, I mean, that was my intention. Right. And yet when, hindsight's always that 20/20 look.
Yeah.
When you look backwards and you go, oh,
right.
I was trying to pour them into a mold, right? Or a cookie cutter.
Right. And of course, this completely hit home with me because I was 28 years old when I accepted Christ. So it was pretty radical. And I was like, oh, you see the difference. And so I didn't know what to do, where to go. I mean, it was like, okay, I'm going to watch the people around me and follow what they do. I have these, at the time I only had a baby, but I was like, okay, I got to figure this out for her because I don't know. And I certainly don't want her doing the things that I did.
Right.
And so it was like, okay, I gotta watch everybody. I gotta read everything. I gotta do this. So I was putting myself in a mold, and I was putting my children in a mold, which again, you and I've talked about, like it wasn't anything that we thought was bad.
No. And we thought we were supporting each other and supporting our children to be the best people they could possibly be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's not that we weren't either. I'm not saying the mold part was necessarily a bad thing. I think what happens is the judgment around the mold.
Right. And when there's a vice on the mold, when there's a vice just holding that mold so tight that nothing's coming out, there's no freedom.
Right.
Then there might be an issue.
Right. And it's so counter to what Psalm 139 says.
Yeah.
That we were formed in our mother's womb, that we were knit together, and that we're unique.
Yeah.
It's so counter to the identity God wants us to have.
Right. And there's, again, when you come into the Christian life, and again, you're trying to figure it out, there's so much contradictory information.
Yes.
That, I've said it in other podcasts. I was so confused. Well, I was confused.
Absolutely. And even denominations, right?
Oh,
there's so many different denominations because each of those is our interpretation of what God said.
Right.
Right.
And so, yeah.
And there's little strings of truth through every single one of them. And the main string that is truth is Jesus is Lord.
Yes.
Right?
Jesus
I want to
is
just
Lord.
put that out there straight up.
there.
I'm not criticizing any denomination. I'm just recognizing that we can form those molds based on what we believe living up to the expectations of that looks like. And I call it rules versus relationship.
So good. Yes.
It's really what hits my heart because so many times in my Christian life, I tried to live by the Christian rules.
Yes.
Instead of having a genuine relationship with the Creator.
Wow. And that sounds so Christianese.
In some ways.
But it's truth.
Yeah.
And you and I both, one of the reasons for doing this podcast is to encourage people to get into the Word, to find truth, because that's where it is. That molds are out there, and they're not, like you said, they're not necessarily bad. So it's really finding truth for yourself, and that's how the relationship grows. And the growth that we've talked about, it's like, okay, well, I was new to all of this, so I had a lot of growing to do. But I had hung to that mold so tightly that when things didn't fit into the mold, then I was pretty shocked and disappointed, thinking that I had done something wrong. So that's why I get kind of cranked up about the mold and looking at the relationship part of it, where I wasn't really growing in my relationship with Christ because I was so busy stuffing the mold.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And then chastising yourself because you stepped out of the mold.
Right.
It's the whole thing we do, right?
Right. And then thinking I'm being, disciplined because I was so bad. So.
Yeah.
I just.
In the message that you sent me and that we listened to, man, was that a powerful message. But, she asked the question in there because she based it on Isaiah 64:8. And I did bring my Bible so I would not butcher.
Okay, good.
64:8, Isaiah 64:8. It says, "Yet, O Lord, you are our Father. We are the clay. You are the potter. We are all the work of your hand." And she asked the question, who's shaping whom? And man, was that a powerful question, right? Because she
Yes.
goes on to say, are we trying to shape God into a manageable God that in some ways fits the mold of our belief of what God is, as opposed to making room for who God really is?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Because God, if you'll follow my rules,
I know. If he would just do it, I'd be so happy.
but
Not really.
Not really.
Not really.
You know?
Yeah.
That and that's true. And if you think about that, in some ways we're turning God into a small God if we try to put him in a mold.
Right. Right.
He's too big for the
He's
mold.
way too big for the mold. He's way too big for the mold. Well, there was so much richness in that. And one of the things that she said that, of course, this is my passion and I get all fired up about literally, is to be ready for the fire. When she was talking about how the pottery has to be prepared to go into the fire.
Yes.
And that was so powerful to me because I really found out about myself. I don't like surprises. Good ones or bad ones. They don't sit well with me. Not that I might have a control issue or two that I'm trying to work on, but because the fire comes.
Mm.
And she talked about that it's not an all-consuming fire. It is a fire that will transform you.
I thought that was powerful.
It was so powerful.
Right, that the
Yeah.
fire, you're going to go through the fire.
Yes.
And that the potter is preparing the pot for the proper use.
Yes.
And he's preparing that pot to go through the fire and not be consumed. I just thought, oh my goodness.
Yeah, that was so good.
And yet when you're in that fire, how many times do you think, oh, this is going to take me under, Lord? What are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
What
I go,
are you
no,
doing?
I'm out. There were so many times I'm like, I'm out. And he's an amazing God. He is an absolute amazing God. And there was so much from the clay and the fire. Now I had so many notes because it was so good.
It was so good. And I loved that there was a video there showing us the real potter's process, right?
Yeah.
But I had no idea that they cut off parts of the clay to find out what was soft and what was hard.
Yeah. On the inside.
On the inside of that lump of clay, right? And it's so many times we've heard the analogy of what God does to you is you're like a diamond in the rough and he's chipping away the parts that aren't the diamond, right? Or, you may have heard the famous saying that once upon a time, someone asked Michelangelo what he was carving out of the marble. And he said he was just carving away the parts that didn't belong. He was letting whatever he was carving come out of the rock or the piece of marble, right? And it's that same emerging we do.
Right. And the thing, when she said, they're looking for air bubbles, and they slice the piece and you see a hole in the middle of the piece. And then she slices a few more and it gets smaller and smaller, and then until it was completely smooth and ready.
Yes.
And then started using it. And it really, really is profound. And I think in my life, as I look back now, I'll go like, oh, that was so awful. But I see now how God was preparing me.
Mm-hmm.
And using those situations to teach me a bigger lesson. Although I did not see it at the time, and I was not a happy camper so much of the time because I was like, I don't understand. And that's, that's a tough place to be, but that's how we grow. And I think the message that you and I have talked about and want to make sure that our listeners get is that you support other people in their growth.
Absolutely.
Because we continue to grow.
Yeah.
Until we go home.
Absolutely. And it's easy to say support others or even to support our own growth.
Right.
Right? Because so many times I think in the midst of those fires, it's important to remind ourselves God has a purpose.
Yes.
This will be okay. In fact, a really good friend of mine used to always say, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
That was her saying that she always encouraged me with.
Yes.
When I would get all wrapped up about the little things, she would just look at me and say, this too shall pass. Right? And at 20 something, I thought, really? Well, it's not passing fast enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
But she was encouraging my growth. She was encouraging me to know God had his eye on me. Mm-hmm. This fire was just momentary and it wasn't going to consume me. Right. So, I mean, I think the big question, because I'm the question asker.
Yes, you are.
And I think we just want to end today by asking a question. How do we really support growth for ourselves or for others?